The rodent is free. The Steamboat Willie variant of Mickey Mouse is officially in the public domain, which means anyone can do what they like with him legally. Well, within reason. With Mickey entering the public domain, there has been talk about what is likely to happen or what should happen when other characters become public domain. So I'm going to be thinking towards the future, to what is possible and what I think should be done when Thomas the Tank Engine becomes public domain. Before going into any details, I just want to clarify that what I present today is based on resources available online, and might not be hard fact. Everything I state here is researched to the best of my ability, but information may be subject to change as of this video's release. The Railway series is the source of all Thomas the Tank Engine material. Everything stems from here. The first book, The Three Railway Engines, was published on the 12th of May 1945 by the Reverend Wilbert Awdry. So you're probably thinking 2045 is going to be a great year for Thomas fans. Well, not exactly. The current UK rules on copyright and the public domain is that artworks fall out of copyright and enter the public domain 70 years after the author's death. So our beloved trains are protected until 2067, though possibly on the 21st of March. That last detail would need checking. Either way, according to the current rules, 2067 is the year to look forward to. Now I want to delve into what is possible as of that year. The Reverend published 26 books for the Railway series between 1945 and 1972. There are also 2 annuals and 3 standalone books. These are Thomas's Christmas Party, Thomas Comes to Breakfast, and Thomas and Gordon Off the Rails. The Reverend also adapted 12 of his stories for a pop-up book format. There's even 4 companion volumes, including the Island of Sodor Law book, which was co-written by George Awdry. The Reverend also hosted 2 lectures on Sodor Law, which Tim Dunn has since hosted, but as these are not in book format, I will not be including them in this, as the rules they may be different for this material. Whew, that is a lot of material. Even with half of the Railway series under the credit of Christopher Awdry, and the years of televised material and magazines, etc., this franchise is still pretty rich. You probably want to know when you can get your hands on all of this content to legally use as your own. After all, only the 3 Railway Engines came out in 1945, while everything else gradually became published over the next 50 years. You'd have to wait each year to be able to get a new character and have to build on Sodor at the same pace as the Reverend himself did. Heck, Thomas himself isn't even the first one to enter the public domain in his own franchise, right? Well, here's the thing, and this blew my mind. Although last updated in 2021, the UK Gov website should be the most reliable resource for legal information in the UK. It states that for literary, musical, dramatic and artistic works, the copyright duration withstands, as I have previously said, from the date of its creation until 70 years following the author's death. So that's everything under their name? Do we get the entire Railway series as penned by Wilbert Awdry at the same time? Well, if that's the case, that's awesome. The series could be started any way we like, we'd have access to all the lore that Wilbert established later on, and be able to set it up right from the start. There could potentially even be an adaptation of Thomas the Tank Engine rich enough to rival the classic TV series, if orchestrated well enough. However, there is one problem, and hear me out with this one. It's the fandom. You're probably wondering, well, why are we the problem? We keep this franchise alive. We understand it better than the executives. Have you even seen all the fan series that we've made? You're not entirely wrong. This franchise has some phenomenal talent, and Thomas has inspired its fans to become creative individuals who can compose great music, author engaging stories, craft stunning models. Some of us were even able to replicate the TV series aesthetic to a T. But this fandom's greatest quality may also be its greatest downfall. You can see what's happened to Mickey Mouse, with how not 5 days after he entered the public domain did we have at least 3 announcements for projects that use Mickey in some way. And those are just people looking to cash in on something iconic and forcing the horror aesthetic onto it. Now, take a passionate fan base who have spent generations making fan content, but now they can make an actual franchise out of it. It's probably a melodramatic assumption, and I sure hope that's the case, but the worst thing that could happen would be for tons of people to try and make the new Thomas the Tank Engine franchise, under the impression that they're bringing something new to the table. Then what's going to be special about him? Oversaturating the market with Thomas would be enough to diminish the franchise's marketability. Now, in the grand scheme of things, Thomas is not as big as someone like Mickey Mouse. Mickey's everywhere, of course loads of people are going to put their finger in the pie. But if all fans start some free-for-all, where the goal is to create the next iconic version of Thomas the Tank Engine, no one's going to care. And the franchise could fall further into obscurity than ever before. Well, that's a bit depressing, huh? It's not all doom and gloom though. That is just one potential issue that may be faced, one with a pretty simple solution. As a song once told us in a fantastic Thomas movie, we make a team together. You see where I'm getting at? Now, I'm not proposing anything specific here, but I believe if the fans were to combine their talents, a reimagining of Thomas could easily be realised by a whole independent production team. A team of writers to adapt the stories and write their own, concept artists to set a house style for how the world of Sodor looks, artists and animators to bring the concept art to life, composers for the soundtrack, voice actors, the list goes on. This obviously applies to television media, but it can also be applied to books, concepts for merchandise, etc. Now, not every fan will want to be in the business side of things, and that's perfectly okay. I'm not saying everyone has to come together to make a Thomas series, absolutely not. But if people wanted to make a vision of that nature happen, and teamed up to make it so, you would get the strongest outcome. I think the only other thing to advise would be that, if that's what you're doing, just to simply respect the source material and the vision that the Reverend had. If you disagree with a detail in the lore and wanted to change it, that's fine. Think a certain engine should have a different basis? Go ahead, we've all done it. But when you're thinking about swearing engines or doing dark edgy stuff for the sake of dark edgy, you might want to take a step back. I know the majority look down on something like All Engines Go for how far it strays, but the truth is, if it was a supplementary series, then who would actually hate it? It's only hated for replacing what would have been new material in the old format. We could easily have ended up with worse. Ultimately, this is 2024. 2067 is a long way away, and society still has a lot of time to change building up to that point. A new and better adaptation of Thomas may come along before it enters the public domain. We might have new talents come along, and there may be new means of creating. All of this has just come from the perspective of one man in the 2020s. And don't forget, even when Thomas enters the public domain, that fan content can still be created and is still valid. The fandom isn't going to come to a sudden halt. When this time comes, and there's a chance to be involved in reimagining the franchise, I'm sure as hell interested. But in the meantime, I'm fine with just making videos on a YouTube channel for fans. And I hope you've enjoyed this one. If you're new, be sure to like and subscribe. I usually do audio drama style stories and the odd video like this one. Have a good day, whatever time you're watching this.
Whoa, right, stop, wait a minute. Before we wrap this up, I just want to cover one more thing, and hopefully keep this quick. I've not taken into account the illustrators. Allow me to make up for it. The illustrators will have different public domain dates, because obviously not everyone left us the same time Audrey did. So, William Middleton's work becomes public domain 2048. Reginald Payne's 2017, although his Thomas illustrations are likely still protected under the book's copyright protection. Clarence Reginald Dalby 2053. John T. Kenny 2042. Peter and Gunther Edwards 2087. So when the books become public domain, the ones that Wilbur Awdry has written, Peter and Gunther Edwards' work will still be copyright protected for another 2 decades. Edgar and Clive are still with us, hooray! So their work is copyright protected until further notice. I've deliberately left Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, Thomas and Friends, All Engines Go out of this because that's likely going to be a bit of a legal mess and I don't want to be going through that. Too complicated for me, I'm sorry. But by all means, do your own research, see what you can figure out if you really want to. But, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think any of that's going to become public domain in our lifetime. Okay, right, I think that's everything that I needed to say. That's the thing I can say. Okay, right.
And I'll see you in the next one. Bye! Mechanical shh.